Hello and welcome to the Intellect's Cove. I'm Colin Fairley. I'm a pragmatist philosopher and political theorist based at Queen's University in Canada. And this video is the final video in the online lectures I've been posting about my new book, Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science. That book is now published and available to both download for free as well as purchase from Oxford University Press. And chapter 12 is titled The Geroscience Perspective on One Health. It's the second chapter in the book devoted to how the aspirations of promoting healthy longevity will be beneficial to non-human species and to planetary health more generally because of its potential to narrow the nearly 10-year gap between lifespan and healthspan. And in the previous video, I unpacked a little bit of what I mean by the Geroscience perspective on One Health. And in this final video, I'm going to anticipate a potential objection or concern that the critic might raise that the development of pharmacological interventions to slow down human aging could constitute what is referred to as a moral hazard to One Health. So I'm going to unpack what a moral hazard is, and then I will mount a response to this particular concern as the final topic to be discussed in chapter 12, at least for the videos. All right, so this is a summary of what I argue in the chapter that I detailed a little bit more in the previous video. The foundational premise of the Geroscience perspective on One Health is that healthy human aging is interdependent with animal and environmental health, right? So one of the key frames that I am adamant about employing for translational gerontology is one that eschews the idea that a pill will dramatically extend healthy longevity, irregardless of the state of the environment. Right? I do believe Gerotherapeutics will be a really important supplement in conjunction with exercise, diet, and the social determinants of health and healthy environments. But we really need to avoid invoking the frame that a pill will be a sufficient intervention, the only intervention that can have a profound impact on extending duration of healthy life. And that is one of the central goals of this chapter. So I try to open our eyes to the role of imagination in the One Health perspective. The One Health concept can be employed by translational gerontology to see both the non-pharmacological interventions that can increase health span, such as physical exercise, better diets, the social determinants of health, but also to keep our mind open to the potential of geroprotective drugs offering a sizable health dividend to human and planetary health by compressing the disparity between health span and lifespan. Now, in this video, I want to focus on what is referred to as a moral hazard. Adam Smith amplified this worry about a moral hazard with the following passage here, that he described that the directors of companies such as the Bank of England, because they manage other people's money rather than their own, cannot be expected to watch over such funds with the same anxious vigilance that partners in a private company managing their own funds would have. Right? So the idea of a moral hazard, especially for translational gerontology and the One Health, is that if we develop geroprotective drugs that extend the duration of healthy life, there's a real risk that we will abandon the planetary health stewardship obligations that we have that require us to ensure that there's healthy environments and that we're exercising regularly, consuming less, and with a more healthy diet. And so I do think this is a concern worth addressing seriously. And so I had just a question mark. Like, what would the likely impact of a major drug innovation that slows aging have on the other dimensions of translational gerontology that are critically important to planetary health? And I think that this has some validity in terms of a real concern. And this is why the messaging about what gerotherapeutics are likely to be able to do is absolutely critical, so that the public don't form the false impression that some drug is going to be a substitute for all of the healthy interventions that they should be pursuing. So would gerotherapeutics create the moral hazard that people will simply say, I can continue with a sedentary lifestyle now that I have a gerotherapeutic that slows down my aging? I don't need to be worried about physical exercise. Or conversely, with an unhealthy diet, to say, well, I'll just continue consuming an excess of calories and sodium and fat. Or in redressing the harms from climate change, to say, well, now adaptation is redressed by slowing aging. These are empirically false beliefs, but that's not to say people won't internalize them. So the way in which the field communicates what geroprotective drugs are likely to be capable of doing is absolutely vital. And for optimal health, we need all of these interventions, right? All of the non-pharmacological as well as the geroprotective geroprotective drugs. And so I think we can draw an analogy with the potential moral hazard that people emphasize with the development of things like Ozempic, anti-obesity interventions. So with those interventions, many people were opposed to Ozempic by saying, well, now you're going to give people a reason not to work on restricting how much they eat or doing more exercise, because they'll simply, inject themselves with Ozempic and see that as a silver bullet to weight reduction. And what the messaging from the real science is, of course, that that is not sufficient. You can't simply take anti-obesity medication and continue to consume large quantities of food and a sedentary lifestyle. So anti-obesity drugs, just like potential gerotherapeutics, are not a magic pill for weight loss or for healthy longevity. At best, anti-obesity medications can supplement, but not replace, the non-pharmacological interventions of traditional preventative medicine, such as healthy diet and exercise. And humans will still require clean air and water, access to green spaces, connections with other people, animals, and nature, and so on for optimal physical and mental health, with or without access to gerotherapeutics. Right? So I think it's really critical for translational geroscience to be conceptualized as one tool among many in the toolbox of promoting health span. Sometimes you hear people give the impression that taking a geroprotective drug would be sufficient for radically transforming the lifespan and health span. And I think that not only is that frame, empirically suspect, but it damages the messaging of what translational science can deliver. Translational gerontology has to be conceptualized in the more broad way that I described, that sees human and planetary health as interdependent. So I think this analogy with anti-obesity medication and geroprotective drugs is a good one to make. The potential for Ozempic to be a moral hazard is kind of analogous to what people are concerned about with gerotherapeutics. And I think both in informing the public on what the potential benefits of geroprotective drugs are, but also messaging at the same time, for optimal health, we need to ensure that the full range of healthy longevity interventions are pursued. So in particular, when I think about the common objections or concerns raised against translational gerontology, I covered in previous videos the inequality and overpopulation concern. And this one, the moral hazard, is amplifying again the ecological disaster one, that people will just be taking these pills and continue to be consuming too much and emitting more greenhouse gas emissions. But I think that worry is not empirically accurate, because geroprotective drugs are at best a supplement to be taken in conjunction with a wide variety of other interventions that will be facilitating planetary health. So I want to really, amplify in this chapter then this message of the interdependence of these things, and the images that I have for healthy aging here do not represent just, a pill. Exercise, a balanced diet. These things will be better for the environment. We're walking our dogs, exercising. We are designing cities that facilitate both physical exercise and our mental health, enabling opportunities for people to meet in green spaces, connect with nature as well as each other. And there is a legitimate scope for experimental science in laboratory animals that may result in the development of new interventions to promote healthy aging via the consumption of molecules. So the key kind of communicative frame that I emphasize throughout this chapter and the book more generally is that we should think about the central aspiration of translational gerontology as focusing on narrowing the gap between healthspan and lifespan, and that this has benefits to the environment. It's not about creating, a lifespan of 200-300 years, but rather compressing the healthspan lifespan gap by bringing up the duration of healthy life expectancy. And once we emphasize that communicative frame, our mind will be much more likely to be steered in the direction of seeing the environmental benefits of having less of a reliance on healthcare. The healthcare expenditures will diminish, and people will be encouraged to be exercising and consuming less. And so I think there's a win-win for humans, non-human animals, and planetary health more generally. So just to conclude this section, then, it's really important that when we think about the moral landscape today, we're not thinking about the moral landscape as it looked when Charles Winslow was initially conceptualizing the aspirations of medical science at the turn, in the early 20th century, when there was high rates of infectious disease mortality from infectious diseases and poverty. And the One Health concept is a really useful illustration of how that a concept that was initially conceptualized to redress infectious disease risks can be expanded to the chronic conditions that become much more prevalent in an aging world for populations surviving beyond the 7th decade of life. And now the goal should be not simply delaying mortality into later life, making us more susceptible to more debilitating conditions like Alzheimer's disease, but rather to increase health span, and that this would confer benefits on non-human and planetary health more generally. So just to reemphasize some insights from chapter 11, the second video that I posted on there, the Geroscience Perspective on One Health helps us abate 3 unhelpful frames that are commonly deployed, some by climate activists and some by advocates of translational gerontology. The first frame is that climate change should be conceptualized as a problem of intergenerational conflict. And I've tried to rebut that and instead invoke an ethos of solidarity, that younger people will age, they'll age in a warmer world. And so investing in the science of healthy longevity will provide them with better opportunities for mitigating and adapting to the harms of a warmer world. We also need to eschew framing carbon net zero as a sacred value, as if that's the only thing that we care about. We certainly should be trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but we wouldn't do that by proposing to forfeit important public health interventions that could increase lifespan, and certainly not increasing health span. And finally, to point a finger at some vocal geroscientists who talk about conquering aging or radical life extension, this undermines the ethos of planetary health stewardship that I think is both critical to actually employing within translational gerontology and for the way the field communicates to the general public about what this science can deliver. It's not only about improving healthy longevity for human populations. It's also about keeping the planet healthier by narrowing the gap between healthspan and lifespan. And I unpacked a lot of details in Chapter 11 about the carbon emissions from the healthcare, the global healthcare systems, which is estimated to be about 4.4%, and some of the other health benefits that can come from applying insights from translational gerontology to companion pets and to agricultural animals to also narrow the gap between their lifespan and health span. So that concludes what I want to say about Chapter 12, and that being the final chapter in the book means that this long journey of creating online video content on each chapter of the book has come to an end. I plan to do one final concluding video, just looking back on creating the video content for this book and a brief summary of the main argumentations. But that brings to a conclusion the kind of chapter by chapter overview of the book.